So you've taken your client through some NASM assessments like the overhead squat, and you've determined, you know what, they've got some ankle restriction. Either A, we saw that they couldn't keep those feet forward during the overhead squat, or they had that forward torso lean, and we think it's probably the ankles. So I want to go through and show you guys what to do with it. And the first piece of this equation, and this is a pretty common one, you guys will find what I, over time have started to call like the ankle epidemic. Ankle range of motion is an issue for a lot of people, either A, because the footwear they've been wearing for a long time, or maybe they're like me and they had ankle sprains their entire life and never really figured out how to rehabilitate it. So it's a very common one. So that being said, this can be a very sensitive area for a lot of people. You think about obviously a lot of force going through our feet up into our ankles and calves. So as I go through and just talk quickly about foam rolling of the calves, which can be a helpful area, there's only so many areas of the body that I really like to spend time with clients foam rolling. This is one, because I know a lot of people have a lot of restriction through the calves and also a lot of sensitivity. So start light. Here I have a pretty dense, thick roller. You might start with a softer roller, and then also knowing that as we're rolling, trying to get some relief or maybe some release in those calf muscles, even how I go about doing it can have a big impact. But either way, this is definitely an area where potentially going through and doing a little bit of myofascial release, some foam rolling can have an impact. It may not impact everybody, right, based on whether it's connective tissue or it's muscular tension like overactivity, but it definitely is worth going into, especially if you're gonna go in and do what comes next, which would be maybe some static or some active isolated or even dynamic stretching. So oftentimes, if we're gonna do a little bit of foam rolling, maybe 30 seconds to a minute, right? You're thinking about all you've got to accomplish inside an hour training session, trying to find those, like take your breath away sensitive areas, spend a little bit of time, 30 seconds to a minute per side. Now, once we've done that, we would potentially go right into some either static or active isolated stretching. And I'm gonna give you guys a couple of my favorites, or at least the ones that I find to be most effective for a lot of people. Simplest one to go right into is gonna be what we call kind of like an ankle rock. And the reason that I like this one, we will stand up and do some calf stretching as well, but the reason that I like this one is because when we're starting to think about these corrective exercises, we wanna think about how can I translate this mobility into the movement I'm gonna do. And if you guys take a look, right, we found this ankle restriction, we're trying to improve position in a squat. Well, guess what this leg looks like? Kind of looks like a squat, right? Maybe more so than some of the calf stretches we'll do against the wall. So either way, I think this is a very easy one to go into because it gets us focused on trying to drive that knee forward, right? And there's two components of this potential stretch too. There's me putting body weight in. Even as you see, I can come up to try to put more of my body weight to just stretch that tissue and get more dorsiflexion. But then there's also, right, if we keep in mind, reciprocal inhibition, activation of the opposite side. If we do have ankle restriction, right, our gastroc and our soleus, those two major calf muscles, well, if I can like actively engage the anterior tibialis, the shin muscles, and kind of pull me forward, it's a weird feeling, it's not a muscle we often work, then that can also be helpful in the process, right? So there's a simple approach towards one. I also want to show you guys probably some more common ones. You can see here we have a little bit of like an ankle calf stretcher here. You could perform this just on an elevated surface as well, but this also tends to be probably one of the like most feel-good moves that people can do coming in. A lot of tension coming from down there. And so this not only feels great, but this can be a helpful area. I mean, there's not a ton of areas that I'll say as a coach and trainer, I do a lot of static stretching. This is one for a lot of clients that I will. 30 seconds to a minute, just trying to lean forward, give them a little bit more length, especially when we're standing, more so in the gastroc. You'll find you could do the same thing just on any other elevated surface that you might have, or truthfully, even just from the ground. So work with what you got, but I definitely believe when it comes to static stretching, calves might be one of the most common areas that I end up doing that with. Now from that, we can get a little bit more dynamic, and that might actually lead to some better gains into the workout for most people. This also fits really well just into your warm-up routine as we're trying to get more movement, is actually just going into calf raises. But the key is the intention that we approach the exercise with, right? We have our static stretch. This could be done with double or single. Aside from getting as high as possible, now we want to think about pulling ourselves back down. And again, it's kind of active. I'm not just like letting myself drop. I'm almost thinking about using my shin muscles to pull myself as deep as possible and then come back to the top. And a lot of people will need to start with two, but over time, Same, if I can get someone into one, slow pull right back down, that can be a pretty effective way of just trying to get some more range of motion in those muscles. The last one I want to show you more so from, let's call it like an active flexibility in the calves, is going to be from that bent knee position again, all right? This one, going back to that little half kneel stretch that we did, well, again, we want to translate into that position. So it's not just gastroc, but it's also soleus here with that knee bend, that secondary calf muscle. And so also thinking about doing calf raises from this position, which you'll find for most people super weak, right? I think if you've seen some of our previous videos, I had Coach Louise doing this and our balance progressions as well, but going into calf raise and then trying to pull myself back down again deep, right? And you guys can see this is a tough one for me. I don't get all the way down to the ground. Boom, slow, pulling myself back down in. And this is a pretty active one. You're getting a little bit of balance. We're getting some activation of that leg as well, but just giving you guys some more ideas on trying to get active flexibility in the calves. And probably the last piece you could add to this, the missing equation for some people can also be the anterior tibialis, right? It's one thing we've talked about, that reciprocal inhibition, getting flexibility, stretching, trying to get range of motion. But we also want to make sure sometimes during the squat that anterior tibialis isn't firing enough to pull us into a better position or to help control us throughout. So we can do some anterior tib raises. There's two ways I like to do this. You guys will kind of see my backside for a second. Initially, because I think it's a little easier to navigate, having a small surface you can elevate up on. And then it's literally the opposite of a calf raise. Now instead of my ball of my foot being here, now my heel is there. I'm trying to slowly control down and then pull those toes back up, right? This is a tough one for me with previous ankle injuries. But what we're doing is now we're trying to get those anterior tibialis working isometrically to pull back in. So that's one version. You can also do it the opposite way. You guys might see this one better, but letting those feet come down, pull back up, and working through. If you guys are doing these ones too, you'll find this is a tough one for a lot of people. I mean, when's the last time you saw somebody do that at the gym? Probably never. So going with maybe 1 to 2 sets initially, as many reps as we can, let's say 15, 20, right? Some higher repetition as you guys build up some of that over time. So hopefully this gives you guys a couple of ideas on how you can try to get the ankles moving a little bit better. And the easiest way to know if it's working, guys, is just test and retest, right? Do a little bodyweight squat before and then do a bodyweight squat after and see if it's a little bit better. And the last piece that I want to add on to this, because obviously we're looking at correcting or improving the way people move, but make sure we're thinking about the exercises that we choose. Those who have those ankle issues, bringing the body forward, probably the best way to go about squatting for that person initially while you're making those ankle improvements is going to be some sort of front-loaded goblet squat, all right? I hope this helps you guys as you begin working with clients and taking all that you've learned inside the NASM material and the overhead squat and translate it into great programs.